Tonight, a silent formation emerges towards the misty paths of Middle-earth, feeling the heavy, ancient responsibility echoing in the depths of your mind weighing on your shoulders. As the window's free wind caresses your skin, the coldness of the metal in your palm leaves a weight not your own upon your soul. You are taking your first step away from the comfort of an ordinary life, towards that desolate and dark path that will decide the world's fate. Wrapped in that strange, settled melancholy of leaving everything you know behind under the moon's silver stain, you advance without knowing where the path leads, listening only to the whisper of the night. On this dark yet serene journey, your breath carries you a little further from yourself, closer to an absolute silence. Now close your eyes and imagine being part of a single road passing among those ancient forests, deep valleys, and impassable mountains. I thank you for making me experience separations in these peaceful, history-filled journeys. If you wish to hear more of these soothing narratives and rest your mind in the depths of history, you can subscribe to the Sleep and History channel. You can also support the channel by joining with the Join button, which would make me very happy. Thank you in advance. The noise of the day's clamor is now far from you. You leave all that complex structure and tension at the door. At this moment, no responsibility, no urgency, is more valuable than your inner peace. Focusing on your breath and this monotonous story is enough. As your body grows heavy in the softness of your bed, we make a gentle transition towards Middle-earth's hazy mornings and silent nights. Let your spirit be free, let your mind set out on that ancient road that seems endless, following only my voice. As you stand on the threshold, the intense scent of oak wood you left behind leaves a familiar ache in your sinuses. But it's not just the warmth of a dying fire, it's also the final echo of the trust accumulated within these walls for generations. As the polished brass handle begins to cool in your palm, your fingertips feel for the last time the visible waves of heat radiating from the hearth touching your skin. In 14th century rural Europe, a peasant leaving his hearth meant not just leaving a home, but abandoning the soul-sacred sanctuary that ensured his survival. You are now at a similar level of departure. In the room, shadows form gigantic shapes on the walls with the last flickers of the dying embers, and they follow your slow movements. The familiar, solid sound of the wooden floor under your feet begins to clash with the uncertain rustle of wet grass promised outside. In those old times before industrial noise invaded nature, the silence of a home was a treasure that rested the human soul. You are breaking this silence with the cold, metallic weight of the thin chain around your neck. The breadcrumbs left on the kitchen table stand there as the most concrete and sorrowful evidence of the ordinary meal that just ended. Just as a bowl of warm soup left behind held meaning for a traveler setting out on the dark, treacherous roads of the Middle Ages, for you, this seeping warmth from the hearth is a vital source of solace to the same degree. The coolness of the night air slipping through the door crack collides with the stagnant, warm air inside, creating a strange shudder in your collarbones. As your eyes fill with the phantom of the soft pillow and thick quilt you just left behind, the straps of the pack on your back test their first real pressure on your shoulders. In the old world, a person's departure was always considered equivalent to a kind of death, because whether they would return or not was entirely at the mercy of fate. Now you too watch how the orange light seeping from behind this small round door dissolves into the place it emerges. The patterns on the rug on the floor turn into labyrinths as the light fades, trying to call you back to that striking security inside. However, your fingers do not release the handle, and that thin sound of metal on metal echoes in the room, mingling with the silence outside. Just as the extinguishing of a lantern brought absolute loneliness in the desolate towns of the early 1800s without electricity, this door closing marks such a beginning for you. The sooty warmth left inside now hangs in the air, about to turn into a memory you will tuck away in a corner of your mind, to be remembered when you are cold. Your next breath takes you a bit further from that stagnant air of your home and into the wild, vast atmosphere of Middle-earth. As your steps now slide onto the stone steps, the final warmth of the hearth you left behind leaves a straight line of heat down your back under your cloak before scattering away with the night wind. When you take your first step out beyond the familiar, safe level of the garden fence, you feel the soles of your boots suddenly soften and make contact with nature's damp blanket. Since the first lights have not yet appeared on the horizon, a single dewdrop collapsing under its own weight on the grass shrouding the Shire's hills makes a distinct, muffled, rhythmic sound as it is crushed beneath you. This sound is the purest nature melody a traveler in those very ancient times could hear, before the world became acquainted with metallic cracks and machine noise, when silence was an absolute ruler. That fine chill climbing towards your ankles seeps through the fabric and touches your skin, and with each step you encounter the wet resilience of the grass. For an 18th century farmer living in non-industrialized rural areas, this dew's presence was a cool herald of the coming morning and existence itself. For you, it is merely the first physical contact of the process leading into uncertainty. The slight rustle arising from the total amount of grass feels as if it creates an immense echo within your solitude, and your mind focuses solely on this simple, monotonous motion. The green sea, visible in the darkness but proving its existence through sound, bends like a wave before your step and tries to return to its old form behind you. The feeling of merging with the land and waiting for nature's awakening that a soldier felt while patrolling his fields in ancient Mesopotamia at night now resides within your weary mind. When the moonlight sifts through the clouds and strikes these thick patches, it creates a sight as if thousands upon thousands of tiny crystals have been sprinkled, and you work to maintain your balance on this warm yet slippery ground. As the fresh, dewy scent of the grass fills your lungs with each breath, it reminds you how far you have moved from your home's dry, stagnant air. Like the messengers who had to travel from place to place throughout the Middle Ages, sustaining their journeys by listening only to the sound of their footsteps during night travels, you too tried to define your own identity within this rapid rhythm. The flexible motion exhibited by the wild clovers and tall reeds with your passage is a silent, sleepy reaction showing the presence of nature's own being. With each step, you can hear the tearing of plant fibers and those microscopic water explosions under the soles of your feet. This is such a low-frequency sound that it only becomes audible when the soul quiets down. You now grasp much better how people in the pre-industrial revolution era, in this absolute tranquility of nights, attributed mystical meanings to every single natural sound, as you do now amidst these rustlings. As the leather parts of your shoes absorb the moisture, they grow heavier, and this weight makes you tread more firmly on the ground, transferring your bond with the earth to a more physical dimension. The small stones and roots creating bumps among the grass pose small obstacles for you on this wet ground. Yet that rustling sound continues to lull you like a lullaby. Under the silent stars in the sky, this vast silence broken only by your footsteps actually whispers to you every second that you are part of the universe's ancient and permanent order. Even the sudden, distant wing flaps of night birds remain as mere temporary parasites next to this constant, monotonous crushing sound of the grass. Before reaching the harsh texture of the forests and mountains awaiting you ahead, this soft, damp beginning turns into a kind of purification period. You can see how your steps have now become automatic and your mind exists only with this rustling rhythm, transforming you into a mere shadow gliding beyond time and space. As you approach that immense watery presence felt in your soul, observed from beyond the expanding horizon, the texture of the air suddenly transforms, opening the doors of a new world to you. The wind hitting your face is not just an empty air current. It is like a dense envoy carrying the memory of all the valleys, steep mountains, and shores your foot has not yet touched along the way. The sharp yet fresh scent of soil carried within this wind scatters all the complexity in your mind like a fog cloud, trapping you in the absolute reality of the present moment. In 3000 BC, the ancient, vital aroma spreading during the moments when the Nile River's flood met the sun with its fertile silt now awakens a similar awe in your sinuses. The richness of minerals lingering in the air fills your lungs like a silent cry of minerals that have woken from a 1,000-year slumber beneath the earth. In your breath, you can distinguish the different layers within this damp scent, the coolness of fine stones, and the fertile lives of decayed beings separately. For 17th-century sailors on transoceanic voyages, the first scent of land discernible after weeks of salty sea air was a hope. This scent similarly creates a feeling of a safe harbor in the wild for you. The grassy, slightly sour breezes carried from the reeds on the riverbank, blended with that heavy, heady scent, remind you how vast and alive Middle-earth is. As the path hardens under your feet, this fresh scent carried by the wind lends a new rhythm to your steps, turning their fatigue into a light numbness. In ancient Mesopotamia, the moist, earthy essence carried by the wind blowing at night over the fertile plains where the Euphrates and Tigris met was the foundation of humanity's first trust in life's continuity. Within your soul now, this most basic and honest bond provided by nature in the midst of the unknown persuades you to continue on the path. Each scent particle reaching your nose acts like a microcosm whispering that microorganisms and their lives continue ceaselessly within the soil. The feeling of security and cleanliness a traveler in the 19th century felt while breathing the untouched air after escaping the sooty atmosphere of industrialized cities now resonates in every corner of your lungs. The wind, gathering water particles from the river and combining them with this scent of earth, weaves a veil over the world, making you feel how processes are preserved and how only this sensory experience remains eternal. The first mixture of plant and moist soil inhaled by a caravan approaching an oasis after months of dusty travel along the Silk Road now naturally soothes your current weariness. The intensity of the scent momentarily erases the dark, ashy phantom of Mordor in your mind, leaving its place to that green and brown dream on the river's fertile banks. With a single gust, the secrets of 1,000 years hidden under the earth are revealed, and you journey within this visible library simply by breathing. As this fresh scent wraps your weary nerves like cotton, you experience the peace of surrendering completely to nature's oldest and most faithful guide. Although the river's roar has not yet reached your ears, this fragrant herald it sends ahead announces that water and life are very close, calming your soul. This intense aromatic dance of the vegetation carries the universe's mute and ancient narration within every physical vibration. As the sun drifts with a heavy slowness towards that vague, misty boundary of the horizon line, the hobbit village's lush, round hills suddenly transform, cloaked in a deep magenta and a velvety gray. This color change consumes all the fatigue of the day for you and is the quietest yet most devastating signal of surrender to the night. As the orange and red lines in the sky separate from the indigo on the ground, the valley regions between the hills begin to fill with dark shadows stretching like living, gigantic beings. The golden hour in the rural regions of ancient Greece before the 5th century BC, when everything was shrouded in a sacred silence with sunset, is now reborn in this fairy tale geography you are in, with the heaviest tones of purple. This calm, serene dance of colors rests your tired eyes while causing the sharp edges of the divisions in your mind to blur and focus solely on the deep melancholy this view creates. The lightest shade of violet, creating a different dimension of depth perception in the rugged depths of the valley, suddenly transforms even the most familiar paths into strange and mysterious passages. The solitary oak trees atop the hill rise as jet-black silhouettes against this purple background, standing motionless like the first faithful sentinels of the approaching pups. You can now feel in your soul how people in late 18th century Europe, before the sooty fogs of the Industrial Revolution covered the skies, watched these natural color transitions at day's end with such great admiration. Light's disappearance so gently and completely was the greatest and only source of peace for people before the harsh, artificial lighting of the modern world. As your eyes gradually adapt to this natural darkness and violet yields to an absolute black, you begin to notice the fine, visible texture of the night. This color palette is not just a visual feast, it is also a silent decree that the safe day has ended and another realm, the realm of the treacherous night, has begun. As each shadow area settles even into the smallest folds, the last crumbs of light remaining on the hilltops also yield to the dull, cold gleam of the stars on the ground. The feeling of helplessness a traveler outside the walls experienced when the sun set in the Middle Ages now reflects to you as a violet-tinged melancholy. The pale yellow lantern lights seeping from the hobbits' windows far in the distance remain like weak grains of sand within these immense, heavy purple voids, reminding you again of your home's remoteness. As you move under the hypnotic effect of these colors, you deeply comprehend that this final visual comfort provided to you is actually the official seal of departure from within. The soothing numbness of purple temporarily relieves the fine ache created by the heavy burden on your shoulders and prepares you for a silent acceptance for the next dark stage. When this color change in the sky is complete, your mind, like those hills, is shrouded in a deep silence, and you begin to listen only to the heavy breath of the night. Along with the union of this light cycle, the last crumbs of resistance in your soul also yield to nature's immense and inevitable discussion. This violet evening represents for you the sacred moment of transition from parting with your identity to transforming into another. When you take that first timid step from the forest's edge inward, the texture of the air suddenly grows heavier, turning into a damp, dense void that pulls you inward. Here, the trees are not just lifeless plant trunks. They are like gigantic beings lost in the depths of 1,000-year slumber, their every breath contained within the millimeter movement of a branch. The sound of the wind sifting through the leaves and trying to reach the ground layers is very different from the known wind whispers. It resembles a muffled moan coming from the depths. In 10,000 BC, the primitive fear and uncanniness felt by the first hunter-gatherer communities walking through Europe's immense, untouched forests after the Ice Age now ignites in a synapse of yours. The intense scent, a blend of dense resin, damp moss, and centuries of decay emanating from the tree's rough trunks, is the most evident sign that this is a completely isolated, unique ecosystem formation from the outside world. The thick, soft layer of decayed leaves under your feet makes a deep, muffled sound with each step, giving the sensation of walking on a living membrane. The dense branches completely blocking the light above form a natural cathedral dome, trapping you in a silence beyond time. The ancient fear Roman legionaries felt when they had to enter the dark, impassable northern forests, feeling watched by eyes hidden in the trees, now circulates on your neck like a cold breath. After a while, the sleepy, monotonous breath of the trees begins to synchronize with your own heartbeat, stripping your mind of all the complexity of the outside world and focusing it solely on this rhythmic flow. Time in this forest is not measured in known seconds but by the growth rate of moss on tree bark or the time it takes for a branch to succumb to gravity and break. When the velvety green texture on a trunk touches your fingertips, you can carry that absorbing, cold dampness to your soul, as if the forest is transferring all its knowledge to you. The feeling of smallness and awe that the first naturalists felt when confronted with this immense, silent dominance as they ventured into the depths of undiscovered continents towards the end of the Middle Ages now becomes the sole reality of your current existence. The sudden, unidentifiable crackles from the depths of the forest are actually organized pulsations of the irregular tossing and turning in the dreams of this gigantic organism. As you glide like a shadow among the boundaries of this nation, you deeply feel that they have only given a drowsy permission to your passage and that they can revoke that permission at any time. The stagnant energy in the air physically weighs you down as it fills your lungs, slowing and monotonizing your movements as if you were in a dream. You understand that modern man's false dominance over nature, symbolized by the sacred oaks under which ancient people made offerings, has no meaning here. With your next breath, you merge more with the forest's ancient, sleepy spirit. You transform from a traveler into a small part of a vast green labyrinth. The appearance of the path, this heavy, damp breath enveloping you, allows fear to be replaced by an absolute acceptance and a numb peace. The rhythmic creaks of the ancient wooden floor groaning beneath you. These creaks are not noises. They are like acoustic echoes of the traces left by thousands of travelers, merchants, and adventurers who have passed over them for centuries, sifting through the corridors. With each of your steps, the resonant, throaty sound born from the oak plank's protest makes you feel the immense presence of the inn's own breath. In 14th century roadside inns in England, every step weary travelers took on similar wooden floors echoed like small victory cries against the gathered savagery outside. You too are now drawn into a similar sense of security. Each millimeter of flex in the life-weary wood beneath your boots blends with the recorded accumulation of wax and gathered dust, creating a prepared melody. The slight static energy felt up to the structure of your foot soles is a herald, and this energy is a main storage unit that preserves you. In 17th century postal coach stops, the monotonous creak at late hours was considered the final threshold before travelers surrendered to sleep's deepest stages. As you advance towards the dimly lit corners of the inn, you notice that some planks produce higher-pitched sounds while others are deeper. This is like a map of the moisture and age within the wood. When you close your eyes, just by listening to these sounds, you can imagine how vast the inn is and how the weight of the ceiling beams is distributed on the floor. Unlike the stone-paved lodging points of the Roman Empire, this wooden floor offers you a living, organic, and flexible shelter, resting the soul. Each of your steps leaves a faint echo resonating on the floor, and this echo turns into a natural white noise that drowns out the whispers of other people in the room. A light whistle sound adds to these creaks from the cold air seeping through the fine gaps between the planks, and it picks apart all the complex, fragmented pieces in your mind one by one. Just as the constant creaking and yawning sound in the holds of massive sailing ships on transoceanic voyages in the early 1800s lulled sailors as if in a cradle, this inn's floor invites you to such a tranquility. As you approach the end of the corridor, the rhythm of the creaks slows, and their tone becomes heavier, more deliberate. This resonates with how much protection there is here, injecting that basic human comfort of being under a roof into your veins. Every single roughness on the floor, each knot hole, whispers to you that you are safe tonight as it groans under your weight. Since the earliest times, this physical and auditory bond man has built with what offers you a much more healing numbness than the concrete silence of the modern world. When your steps are now tied and you begin to listen only to the micro creaks the inn makes on its own, your mind steps begin to unravel towards the heavy, velvety self of sleep. When your steps reach that pile of shattered stone at Aman's Soul, You can see in every cell how the world around you has suddenly expanded and how you have simultaneously shrunk. Here is not just a hill. It is the remnants of what was once a tower reaching for the sky, now a gray heap crushed between time's merciless teeth. The wind, encountering no obstacle on this bare summit, whips your cloak like a wild flag, and the sound howling in your ears transforms into a cool anthem carrying the distant war cries of armies past. In the 5th century BC, the feeling of absolute sovereignty a lone soldier felt while keeping watch in the fire towers built on the endless, desolate mountain ranges of the Persian Empire now works its way into your marrow, severing you from the world. The ground under your feet is composed of hard stone pieces polished by rain and storms over centuries, having lost their sharp edges. And this cold surface tests your balance and resolve with your every movement. When you fix your eyes on the horizon, where the spreading sky merges with the endless ground, you cannot escape feeling like a speck of dust. The crushing smallness a lost traveler felt in the absolute desolation of high plateaus and the darkness and uncertainty of the Middle Ages now numbs and weighs down your mind, part by part. This collected silence is not just the absence of a physical space. It is as if the air itself possesses a memory and has concentrated all the sorrow and abandonment of the past on this summit, harboring an uncanny weight. Every time the wind strikes the nooks and crannies of the rocks, the high-pitched, endless whistle it produces takes the last crumbs of peace from your mind to the distant valleys, leaving you with the sound of your own regulated breathing. The feelings of legionnaires serving in isolated, smoky watchtowers at the northernmost border of ancient Rome, shivering with inexplicable restlessness in the absolute silence of the night, now cause the hair on your nape to stand on end. As the sun's angle changes, the shadows of the ruined walls around you lengthen and shorten like black hands, and you succumb to an optical illusion as if the stones themselves are shifting. The air being so thin and the complete absence of any bird or insect sound forces your heartbeats to slow and adapt to the monotonous, heavy rhythm of the silence. You now better understand how lighthouse keepers spending months in isolated, high towers in the early 19th century emptied their minds and entered a kind of trance in the face of the seas and wind's endless monotonous symphony. When your fingers touch the moss-covered coolness of these ancient stones on the summit, you realize you are bound to hear and that you are not just a guest but a temporary, faint shadow within this immense solitude. The dark lines on the horizon grow and become more distinct throughout the night, making your unprotected and visible silhouette on this hill even more prominent. The state of alertness a lone rider felt in the 1800s, suspecting every rustle of a bush or change in wind direction, while having to spend the night in the open on desolate steppes, now blends with the fatigue in your mind. As this uncanny frame draws you in and swallows you, the wind's melody turns not into a lullaby but an ancient warning whisper, continuing to echo in your ears. Every gust lifts these ancient dusts on the summit, forming a visible halo around you, merging you with this stony silence, completely cut off from the outside world. The dry sound of each step you take on the lichen echoes like a sin within this silence. This sound begins to detail every cell as a low-frequency prayer that, like a sponge, absorbs and destroys all that complex, predatory structure in your mind. As the microscopic water particles lingering in the air touch your skin and wash away the road dust and weariness accumulated on your shoulders for days, the cool air you draw into your lungs reminds you in the safest way that you are alive. The regular trickle from the artificial water channels wealthy Roman nobles built in their villas in the 1st century BC, seen as a healing force for the human soul, is now a very primitive imitation of the natural therapy you experience in this valley. When the pale golden rays of the evening sun, sifting through the massive spruce and pine trees surrounding you, strike the clear liquid trickling from the rocks. Small rainbows and glittering halos form in every corner of the valley. As you advance with heavy steps within these light plays, you are enveloped in the smooth feeling of security provided by stepping on the white stone carved directly by water. The absolute tranquility of the closed paradise gardens called Paradisa. In ancient Persian kingdoms, the ancestor of the later garden phenomenon, reaches its deepest and most real form in this secluded valley's waterfalls blended with evenings. The different tone gurgles the waterfall leaves as it falls from one step, echo in your mind like syllables of an ancient language needing no words, inviting you to a kind of meditative somnolence. It merges so elegantly with the harsh lines of the valley's nature that it is impossible to tell where the stone ends and the handiwork of erosion begins. This makes you feel that time is not flowing here, only making its presence felt. The spiritual depths experienced in the long, monotonous hours by monks in silent 12th century monasteries, merging by listening to the sound of water striking stone in a courtyard, now take physical form in your breath. While the fresh, green scent emitted by the damp mosses by the stream hangs in the air, blending with the sharp aroma of pine resin, it softens and weighs down your mind like a pile of cotton. The moment a single water droplet breaks from the rock and joins the pool below is like a small rehearsal of the universe's endless and unchanging cycle of life. Compared to the peaceful evenings in the gardens of the Alhambra Palace in Córdoba and Granada during the Andalusian period, where water served both as a cooler and a tool for remembrance, the natural sanctity offered by this valley renders them mere pale memories. You notice that even the pressure created by the heavy metal chain around your neck lightens momentarily where it is caught on the white foam of the currents descending from the snowy peaks above, as if the buoyant force of the water also carries the soul upwards. The absolute silence here is not an absolute independence. It is the perfect merging of thousands of nature's sounds into a single white noise. The overwhelming awe a romantic era hero felt in the face of nature's monotonous melody after escaping the noise of factories in the industrialized world of the 19th century to take refuge in the secluded valleys at the foot of the Alps now becomes your sole reality. As the light leaves the valley and where it goes, the sound of the waterfall becomes even more distinct, and it buries everything nearby, all your fears and anxieties about the future, under that immense volume of water. With each droplet striking the stone, it files down the rough edges in your mind one by one, trapping you in a pure, smooth, and heavy calm. Washed by this water's sound, your soul accepts that it belongs not to the continuation of the journey but to the eternity of this moment as darkness falls, and it is dragged heavily downwards. The first fluid and melodical words in the Sindarin language flowing from an elf's lips engrave a rhythm and tempo not your own onto the walls of this open-air stone council. Every vowel of this language is as soft as gliding on a smooth water surface, yet possesses an equally crushing effect with the weight of meaning it carries. Just as the loud, rhythmic oratory of speakers in the Nyx assembly in Athens before the 5th century BC sowed the first seeds of democracy with a social calm, the elven voice resonating here now envelopes the soul with a similar authority. As the speeches progress, the short but deep silences between words create ordered patterns in your mind like ocean waves receding, preparing you for the next syllable. Immediately after, the ringing voice of a dwarf from the Kuzda language, as if ripped from the deep layers and hard corners of his homeland, makes you feel the reverberations in the stone floor and the soles of your feet. Every consonant within this voice carries a clarity and indisputable certainty like a hammer striking an anvil, instantly scattering that soft melody in the air. The acoustic atmosphere created by priests' Latin prayers flung towards the high vaults in the massive cathedrals of medieval Europe, intoxicating with trance, comes to life here in a more complex form with the chaos of different races' languages. The voices of men enter between these two extremes with a more hurried yet equally fragile tone. Their expressions in the common tongue bring the raw reality of their brevity and survival desire into this sacred space. As the heavy echo at the end of each sentence returns from the valley's mountains, it settles on your shoulders as if not just a sound but a part of that impossible decision that must be made. The hypnotic effect created by the multilingual ceremonies held in the famous Magnora Hall of the Byzantine court in the 9th century before foreign envoys is like a traditional projection of the drowsiness you now experience within this stone circle. The speaker's solemn expressions and the duration each word hangs in the air break your normal time perception, pushing you into a kind of timeless pit. As the monotonous yet intricate dance of languages lowers your mind's defense mechanisms one by one, you become a listener focusing only on the pitch and timbre of the sounds. With each dialect's unique timbre, it's as if connected by a visible thread, and an immense dome of sound forms over the council, completely abstracting you from the outside world. The heavy, rhythmic narrative style of epic tales told around campfires at midnight in the desolate steppes of the 1800s is now ingrained in every syllable uttered in this council. While this layered structure of sounds wraps your weary mind like a blanket, you get lost in the choices of sound waves created, preferring over the content of what is said. Even when the final speeches end and a deep silence falls, the reverberation of those languages continues to turn within your ears, escorting you towards a deep, dreamless mental void. A snowflake touches your cheek for a moment. This tiny touch is not just a weather event. It is the first physical sign of the mountain's cold reaction to your presence. The snowflake touching the microscopic warmth on your skin steals a tiny piece of energy as it transitions from solid to liquid state, leaving behind a pinprick ache until it vanishes. In the 19th century AD, the feelings of British climbers attempting to ascend 7,000-meter peaks completely supported by modern technical equipment, with the first shiver seeping through their wool sweaters, are a twin of your current capacity where it resides. As the air temperature rapidly drops below zero, these white powders settling into the structure of your cloak's fibers begin to transform into a heavy armor restricting your movements. The thin layer of moisture accumulating on your eyelids causes your lashes to stick together with each blink, silencing all external sounds to adapt your mind to this monotonous, freezing cycle. Throughout the Middle Ages, the point of no return feeling couriers felt when they saw the first ice crystals accumulating on their horses' manes while having to cross high mountain passes in winter now echoes in your bones. As the wind speed increases, the snowflakes flying in the air are no longer soft feathers. Their edges begin to sharpen like thousands of tiny glass shards. In the 18th century, the first blizzard Napoleon's armies encountered while retreating across the Russian steppes was one of the greatest votes on how human will can be broken within seconds by nature. You too are now experiencing the same submission before this immense mountain. As the ground under your feet freezes and becomes covered with a slippery layer of ice, your muscles struggle, and the tremendous energy they expend cause your body temperature to drop rapidly. The numbness beginning in your fingertips is the silent, biological consequence of blood withdrawing from extremities to protect vital organs. The tragic struggle of ancient armies trying to cross the Alps with inadequate furs and open sandals in these freezing passes is now revived in the white vapor exhaled from your nose with each breath. The absolute whiteness of snow destroys all depth perception around you, pushing you into a kind of sensory deprivation pit, and you can only cling to the reality of that freezing temperature touching your skin. In the late 1800s, the loss of touch sense experienced by sailors stranded on Arctic voyages while untying their ship's frozen ropes on the sea now envelopes your mind with a numbness cloud. Each descending snowflake seems to hum in your ears like a whisper of karatas, reminding you that these heights do not belong to men. The rustling sound of your clothing stiffening as moisture freezes becomes your only rhythmic companion within the storm's noise. The hypnotic freezing state Alexander the Great's soldiers experienced while crossing the Hindu Kush mountains around 300 BC now causes your consciousness to gradually move away from clarity and sink into a white dream. With each snowflake melting, the thin cold line it leaves behind narrows your vital boundary 1 more millimeter inward. When no proof remains in the midst of this white domain except the natural sound of your own breathing, you understand that you have completely surrendered to nature's mute, icy sovereignty, and as the moon's silvery light slowly rises and makes its first contact with the gate where the hidden ancient veins lie, you smile at their awakening. The faint shimmer that appears where the magical, maddening moonlight called Ithil meets the silver in its purest hour develops in an uncertain and detailed form, like a dream appearing in the mind. In 3000 BC, the mysterious shadow plays on cuneiform tablets found in the depths of Mesopotamia, readable only at a certain angle, are like a traditional reflection of the awe created by these ancient runes now coming to life on the gate opposite. As the silvery lines branch out like a spider's web on the stone, the meaning carried by each curve and rune creates an indescribable heaviness in your weary mind. As your eyes follow this soft light, your mind detaches from reality and scatters into the beginning of a satellite revolving only within this silver geometry. The sacred and silent moment when the seals on the hidden chambers discovered in Egypt's Valley of the Kings in the late 19th century first gleamed in the torchlight is equivalent to the absolute tranquility you now experience before this gate. As the lines become clearer, you begin to imagine how the massive arch rising on the gate and the symbols from centuries past were carved and inlaid into the stone. It looks less like an artwork and more like a poem nature wrote to itself. As each particle of moonlight fills the forms within the runes, for a moment you think the stone's hard, cold texture has softened, as if it could turn into a metallic liquid. The transient and deceptive results alchemists observed in dark laboratories during their lead transformation rituals in the late Middle Ages remain dull imitations compared to the real and solemn silver gleam offered by this gate. As the fine lines winding around the runes connect the tree depictions on both sides of the gate, your mind begins to get lost in this endless cycle, forgetting its own existence. The very faint water gurgle coming from the reeds by the lake touches your sleepy consciousness as the sole auditory accompaniment of this visual feast. The mystical and awe-inspiring atmosphere created by the northern lights falling on rune stones in the secluded fjords of the 11th century AD is another version of the deep trance state you now face before this stone wall. The spread of the lines is neither too bright nor too dim. They stand there with a stability that seems as if it would dissolve at the touch, right on the boundary of a dream. You could extend your fingertips along this continuous structure spanning the length, but the fear of disturbing this sacred ray causes you to withdraw your hands back into your cloak. The feeling of infinity astronomers felt when first observing the flickering lights of distant stars with 17th century telescopes now merges with the crushing sense of smallness you feel watching the runes on this gate. As a single rune curve seems to spurt the most important secret of a lost language, and you can hear this whisper only with your soul. As this light play on the stone speaks in a language beyond time and place, it melts away all the anxiety and urgency you carried from the modern world one by one. The timelessness a researcher lost among the shelves of massive libraries illuminated by candlelight in secluded castles of the early 1800s now exists in its most concrete form in you before this gate. The moon will eventually hide behind the clouds, and you know this light will fade. This knowledge binds you even tighter to this moment, and you reach out towards the heavy, dim arms of sleep. While the parts of the runes remaining at home burn like little lanterns for your soul left behind, you desire only to melt and disappear within this cold silver gleam. As you stand on the narrow stone arch, you don't feel the visible chill rising from the depths below striking your kneecaps. The pitch darkness below is not just the absence of light. It is like a physical representation of that absolute void where matter also ends, stretching beneath your feet. The faint shuffling sound of a step you take is lost within seconds in that endless volume below the bridge and fades without any echo in the depths. Since the 4th century BC, the spatial perception loss of miners whose torches extinguished in the deep mines of the ancient world now becomes your sole reality on this stone bridge. When you close your eyes, you can imagine that the immense emptiness below actually creates a vacuum effect like a giant lung working to draw you in. There is no air current here. It is as if time has coagulated within this chasm and has not allowed any sound to reach it for thousands of years. The absolute freedom sailors felt under the crushing weight of water during the first dives into the world's deepest ocean trenches in the late 19th century now envelopes your soul in the bosom of this stone cathedral. The stale, dusty, and mineral-rich smell coming to your nose is a dead atmosphere carrying no sign of life from the world outside, containing only the rock's own internal chemistry. When your fingertips touch the sharp, carved edges on the bridge's sides, instead of giving you a sense of security, they whisper how sheer and merciless that immense emptiness is. The auditory void experienced by a prisoner cut off from all external sounds due to the thickness of the walls in medieval Europe's deepest dungeons now numbs and weighs down your mind. The void being so vast makes even your own existence questionable. It is as if this darkness absorbs and consumes your entire physical volume. The dizzying silence experienced by craftsmen working at the high, isolated points between the vaults of massive 17th century cathedrals, where all sound from the ground was lost, now marks every second of yours in this narrow passage. The rhythm of your heartbeat begins to resonate like a drumbeat in this severe silence, and you even slow your breath to adapt to nature's this muteness. The primitive curiosity you feed about whether the nothingness below has a bottom or not gradually yields to an absolute acceptance and numbness. Like lone travelers spending the night in deep canyons in the early 1800s realizing that not even the stars in the sky could illuminate those depths, you now advance relying only on your sense of touch. This special atmosphere where sound doesn't reflect picks apart all the complex and narrated memories in your mind one by one, dragging you towards pure unconsciousness. With each millimeter of progress, you feel that the invisible cloak of darkness envelopes you like a pile of cotton, and you have entered a universe where gravity is lost. Like a monk working alone among dusty shelves and dark, vast monasteries of the 16th century discovering that silence is actually a substance, you too now notice that this endless nothingness condenses around you. This silence severs you not only from the outside world but also from your own self, sealing you into the mountain's ancient and stagnant being. As the pale silvery light sifting through the golden-leafed mullein trees is spread like a quilt over you, you feel how time's mass thins here and assumes a different rhythm. The grass under your feet resembles no plant texture you know. With each step, it seems to gently push you upward. It momentarily severs the ancient bond between the terrible burden on your shoulders and gravity. When the smooth surfaces of the tree trunks touch your fingertips, they transmit not a cold marble sensation but the calm pulse of a living being. Breathing in this forest is not just filling your lungs with air, it is also like inhaling a memory of thousands of years. The scent of Nipredil and Eleanor flowers lingering in your sinuses brings all the complexity in your mind to the most visible shelf. The absolute peace sought by ancient communities and groves they considered sacred now confronts you as the truth itself here. But this silence is not an absence. It is the purest and most intense representation of continuous existence itself. When you look at the sky, you notice that the stars visible between the branches are closer and more vivid than those in the Shire. A feeling of being able to reach out and touch those silvery points fills your entire being. Breathing in this forest is not just filling your lungs with air, it is also like inhaling a memory of thousands of years. The scent of Nipredil and Eleanor flowers lingering in your sinuses brings all the complexity in your mind to the most visible shelf. The absolute peace sought by ancient communities in groves they considered sacred now confronts you as the truth itself here. But this silence is not an absence. It is the purest and most intense representation of continuous existence itself. When you look at the sky, you notice that the stars visible between the branches are closer and more vivid than those in the Shire. A feeling of being able to reach out and touch those silvery points fills your entire being. While the wind wanders among the branches, the monotonous yet peaceful rustle it creates resembles the awe-filled atmosphere created by hymns echoing in the grandest halls of the Middle Ages. This sound clears the places in the archives of your memory like a river carrying away sand from its banks. Being unable to tell whether an hour or a century has passed here makes you part of Lothlorient's timeless characteristics. The chronological time perception of human order, where birth and death follow each other, completely loses its permanence under this silver gleam. Neither sunrise nor sunset represents an end here. The distant gurgle of the Nimerdale River wanders at the lowest frequencies of a lullaby at the boundaries of your consciousness, leading you to the continuity of a deep sleep state. Unlike the artificial peace a ruler strolling in ancient Mesopotamia's hanging gardens felt, this tranquility seeps into your soul completely naturally and without intervention. Even the sharp cold of the ring's chain around your neck softens a bit with this forest's warm breeze. Where the darkness is, a veil of silvery mist lies. You feel your eyelids growing heavy, as if each blink has turned into a lead weight. But this weight does not discomfort you. On the contrary, it gives you the peace of dropping anchor in a safe harbor. Even the shadows among the trees here are not dark. They are defined as just a different hue of light, a darker silver color. Legends told about ancient Greece's peaceful Elysian fields remain pale imitations compared to these lands you now walk upon. You can hear the slow, intermittent exchange of sap in each leaf's veins with the deep soil below. As the voices in your mind quiet, you begin to hear the ancient song the forest murmurs to itself. This song consists not of words but of pure notes of existence. While time flows like an enemy in the dark geographies where smoke and steel reign in the outside world, here time becomes your most loyal protector. The peace this silence offers is deeper than what humanity could even imagine in the crowded squares of the Roman Empire with their endless hum. The fact that the silver-trunked giants around you seem to protect you gives you great strength without you having to struggle. This strength is not of the kind offered by swords or shields. It is born from the passive yet unbreakable will of merely standing and waiting. When you close your eyes, the images appearing in your mind are no longer Mordor's fires but the bright leaves drifting in Lothlorient's silvery sky. As each breath you take spreads longer and slower than the previous one, your heartbeat also adapts to the forest's heavy rhythm. This means shedding all the remnants of your most basic existence from all titles and duties and melting only within this moment. The hypnotic sound of the silver stream drifts you effortlessly away from all the world's troubles into the depths of a silver dream. With the next step, you completely stop thinking. Because under these silver trees, there is only the stability of the present moment. Unlike the complex rituals of ancient Egyptians in their quest for immortality, immortality here is as close as a breath and equally unassuming. The density of the air around you makes your movements even more fluid, as if walking in liquid light, preparing you for absolute stillness. This silence, which no bird song or noise will disturb, seeps into the deepest corners of your soul, calming you like a statue. This resembles no peace described in history's dusty pages. This is the very untouched, pure peace of creation's first moment. The sound of water pouring from the spout of a silver ewer and joining the shallow stone basin touches your soul with a hypnotic and rhythmic timbre that hides all the world's noises behind a veil of mist. As the water fills the basin, it advances so slowly and controlled that you can watch the expanding circular ripples formed by each droplet on the surface, as if timing them precisely. The texture of the cold, smooth stone the basin is carved from awakens in your fingertips the ancient, confidence-giving strike of marble used in ancient Greek temples. When the water's surface calms and becomes as motionless as a glass pane, you feel that the reflection there carries not only you but also the universe's never-spoken secrets. The absolute clarity sought by seers in ancient Mesopotamia during rituals of reading reflections in a bowl of water now stands before you as a living reality under Galadriel's hands. The coolness of the air, blended with the light steam heated by the water, fills your lungs, and you feel all your muscles relax and grow heavier with each breath. You cannot tear your eyes away from that still liquid, because the silvery threads beginning to appear in the water's depths invite your mind to other realms, like the misty and mysterious reflections of the first mirrors produced towards the end of the Middle Ages. The smallest ripple forming in the water carries the weight of an earthquake, while being as silent as a leaf touching the water's surface. This basin serves not as the superficial peace offered by the stagnant waters in the farthest baths of the Roman Empire, but as a mirror that illuminates the darkest corridors of the soul. As your gaze remains fixed on the area of the water's surface, the whispers of Kara's Galadhon's immense trees fade, and only the heavy motion within that silvery liquid remains. The chain of the ring around your neck interacts with the cold aura radiated by the water, seeming to pull you visibly downwards into that dark, clear depth. The belief that the water's memory holds the passage of ages, a record of memory, now transforms into a physical weight for you, not a legend. As each wave erases the trace of the previous one, you notice that the burdens in your mind also dissolve into each other with the same softness and disappear. The formation of shapes from the faint, smoky areas in the water resembles that ambiguous yet fascinating moment of transition when a dream crystallizes. The feeling of surrender to inevitable fate that a farmer watching the Nile's rise in 3000 BC felt now reflects in your stance before this mirror. The water is so clear that even the finest veins in the veined stone at the bottom can be discerned as clearly as a map of constellations in the sky. Your eyelids surrender without further resistance before this monotonous and flawless calm of the water, drifting downwards. But this is not just a gaze dissolving. It is a feeling as if your very being disperses among the molecules of that silvery water. The refractions in the flow of light numb the consciousness, reminiscent of the slow dance of a single candle flame on the wall in a dark room. Like the balance between the scales believed to weigh souls of the dead in ancient Egypt, this mirror too stands at that delicate point between your past and future. No sound, no wind, dares to disturb the sacred geometry of this water's clarity. When you bring your fingers close to the water's coolness, you feel the air between your skin and the water condense and turn into a gel-like consistency even at that millimeter distance. This is one of the quietest moments of the day. No clashing of swords, no cry of victory, can approach this silvery silence. As your mind drifts like a leaf in that endless story of depth, each wavelength brings you a little closer to that peaceful gray zone between distances. As the silvery glints on the edges of the basin fade in your eyes, giving way to pitch black but soft darkness, you understand in this moment of the journey that each drop of water in the mirror is actually one with your will. This is a heavy, patient, and unstoppable flow. The stillness of the water instills in your soul a similar absolute solitude that descends over the endless steppes of Central Asia at night. When you surrender yourself to these vibrations, to this silvery ambiguity, neither the Shire's green hills nor Mordor's fiery mountains hold any importance anymore. Only this moment, this water, and this silence exist. With the water's recession and the basin's return to its motionless state, the last crumb of light in your mind is also buried in that deep depth. As the wooden oar blades warm in the palms of your hands, you begin to hear the muffled, rhythmic sound of the paddle burying or surfacing in Anduin's cool waters. The water's resistance initiates that hypnotic motion that stretches from your arms to your shoulders, not tiring you but swinging you like a pendulum. As the river's massive body gently carries the boat from north to south, you watch the small vortices formed with each entry of the oar into the water dissipate and vanish in their own rotation. In 4000 BC, the silent and awe-filled advance of reed boats on the Nile River carried a similar timelessness as your current glide on this ancient river. The boat divides the river's smooth surface with a thin silver line, and this dividing sound is thrown away or merges with the light rustle as the wind wanders among the reeds on the bank. When you fix your eyes on the steep cliffs on the shore, you notice the slow, patient struggle of the gray stones with the river water over thousands of years. The layers of moss on each stone stand like tokens of how slowly time has flowed here. Unlike the heavy, forced rhythm pulled by oarsmen on massive Roman galleys, your movements progress effortlessly in perfect harmony with the river's own flow, as if you were part of the water itself. In the brief moment you lift the oar from the water, the fine, deep sounds of the water droplets dripping from the blade and collapsing into the river sweep away the last restrained corners in your mind to the river's depths. The humidity in the air combines with the river's coolness to form a visible mask, and this mask completely isolates you from all the complexity of the outside world, from Mordor's fire and Shire's longing. Compared to the clumsiness of heavy barges used on trade rivers in medieval Europe, this elf-made boat gliding on the water like a feather gives you a feeling of physical lightness. With each stroke of the oar, you take a deep, slow breath into your chest. This river air filling your lungs carries the essence of moss, wet stone, and distant pine forests. The regular yet soft impacts of the currents under the river hitting the boat's hull instill a feeling of security, as if listening to the pulse of a gigantic living being. As the clouds' reflections in the sky break apart and reunite with the light ripples on the river, your consciousness too begins to melt among these flows. The uncanny yet determined glide of Viking ships advancing in the Scandinavian fjords of the 9th century AD matches your isolation within these broad and solemn reaches of Anduin with absolute seclusion. With each movement of your shoulder blades, you feel the joints working like well-oiled machine parts, smoothly, and how physical beings integrate with these monotonous actions. The silence of your other companions in the boat makes your own sound even more pronounced. Only the endless whispering of the water with the oars remains behind. As the sun's scattered light sparkles like thousands of tiny diamonds on the wide water surface, these sparkles turn into a soft yellow mist layer behind your eyelids, inviting you to the most peaceful sleep of your slumber. Just as ancient Mesopotamian civilizations saw rivers as a source of life and the path of the gods, you now understand that this waterway carries you not only to a destination but also to an absolute mental calm. The shadows of the trees surrounding the river stretch like long, dark green fingers on the water, and with each passage of the boat through these shadows, you feel those micro changes in the air's temperature on your skin. Everything is so slow, so regular, and so continuous that at one point you even forget you are rowing. You become just a being floating on the river. The muffled, echoing sounds coming from the water's depths whisper the earth's ancient song to your ear at a monotonous frequency. With the next stroke of the oar, it is lighter than the previous one. The water's resistance is no longer an obstacle. It is as if a supporting hand is pushing you. Within this rhythm, all the wars, rings, and kingdoms in the changing world outside appear as transient and invisible as a bubble. Your mind becomes completely motionless like the water in the river's calmest, widest stretches, and you continue to glide towards an eternal peace within this flow. As you advance with your boat in the narrowing section of Anduin, gliding between the massive stone walls rising from the river's sides towards the sky, you suddenly notice that the view is cut off and a dark, icy shadow falls upon you. When you raise your head, you feel the muscles in your neck tense, and your mind strain under these immense stone characters. Because what stands before you is not just two shapes made of stone. They are two gigantic ruler silhouettes that have frozen time itself. The awe created by the majestic Ramses statues rising on the Nile in 1300 BC now seems like small trials next to these two stone kings towering above. Their hands raised like shields seem to grasp not only the river but also the clouds and sunlight in the sky with an authoritarian gesture. Your boat sliding past these colossal feet, the thin trace it leaves on the water, whispers to you how temporary and fragile your place in Middle-earth's history is. As the moss layers of thousands of years on the stones hang down like ancient kings' beards, the howling sound the wind makes passing between these massive marble fingers turns into a monotonous hymn in your ears. The absolute feeling of smallness felt by Roman architects under the massive Victory arches or during the construction years of Egyptian pyramids now revives in your marrow with the cold, mechanical characteristics felt here. You see that you don't even occupy the space of a single crack within the majestic formations around you, thinking how light the heavy burden on your shoulders actually is in the shadow of these stone giants. But this realization, instead of comforting you, crushes you even more. The dull expression gazing down from the empty eye sockets of the statue seems to read all your fears and questions one by one, while the monotonous sound of water hitting the boat's hull continues to burnish your mind. With each stroke of the oar pulling you deeper into these colossal shadows, you sense the air temperature dropping a few degrees and the ancient, damp scent of stone burning your sinuses. The feeling of meaninglessness and lostness a person feels while walking on the ground in a massive library full of books now becomes the summary of your existence on this river. In the 8th century BC, the uncanny protection given by the winged bull statues guarding the entrances of Assyrian palaces now gives way here to the silent judgment of an absolute authority. Your eyes stick to the finely carved layers on the statues' cloaks. Even though each stone layer is worked with mastery enough to imitate the softness of real fabric, it possesses a hardness that would freeze your fingers if touched. The will imprisoned within these stones absorbs the small and trembling light of hope within you and pushes you towards a deeper silence, a heavier stillness. The flow of time here seems to have condensed and become static between these two giants, slowing your movements and fixing your gaze to a single point. The weight of the endless shifts spent by thousands of nameless workers whose names are forgotten in humanity's dusty pages while carving these figures now hangs over you, shattering in that immense detail. Everything seems so fixed, so stable, and so eternal that the hurried and unchanging events of your journey become an absurd detail before this view. When the shadow is at its densest, you notice the water's color under your boat turns from navy blue to pitch black, and the muffled reverberation coming from the river's depths strikes the stone walls and creates a hum in your mind. This hum details every cell in your brain like a frequency preparing you for the heaviest, most dreamless stage of sleep, reducing you to a mere speck that breathes. The figures of the gigantomachy myths told as the battle of giants in ancient Greece now grind your wool under their immense weight as they take bodily form in these births. You are no longer a ring-bearer, nor a hobbit. You are just a tiny light particle passing through this colossal stone corridor, too insignificant to make a difference. As the boat glides away from that icy shadow towards the light remaining behind the statues, a strange feeling of complete surrender takes hold of your soul along with its retreat. Even the light beginning to play on the water again cannot yet erase the dull trace left in the memory of that dark and freezing passage you just went through. As you lean your back against the gray, rough stone, you begin to feel the undying warmth seeping from the depths of the rock into your skin. Even as the sun hides behind the horizon, these ancient blocks on the Manhen's summit continue to exhale slowly, like living beings, the light they absorbed all day. When you press your palms against this rough mass, you notice that the heat doesn't just remain on your skin. It transforms into a calm that penetrates to your bones. In 3000 BC, the intense, heavy energy of the massive granite blocks under the sun on the Nile's banks now comes to life again in the soul of this ancient dwelling where you hide. While every crack in the stone carries the weariness of thousands of years, the heat it holds reminds you how old and enduring the world is. As your breath slows to harmonize with the rhythm of this undying fire, you feel all the sharp edges in your mind scattering like sand particles. The absolute and permanent ground trace a traveler felt walking on Anatolia's sun-scorched basalt roads in ancient Roman times now awakens in your fingertips. This heat envelopes you not with the burn of an artificial fire but with a kindness that stops time, coming from the stone's own essence. As your eyelids grow heavier with each second this monotonous warmth persists. Even the light whistle of the wind among the ruins atop the hill disturbs this deep silence. The physical surrender a worker felt in the dawn of human order, leaning against Mesopotamia's sun-baked mud walls while waiting for the evening coolness, now dominates your entire being. Everything is so still that you only hear the thin boundary between the warmth of the blood flowing in your veins and the stone's ancient heat dissolving. Like ancient people spending the night among the massive standing stones of the Neolithic age, taking refuge in the warmth held by the stone under the stars, you too find yourself in the safest place in the universe on this summit. The sun's distribution over thousands of years is so tightly packed into the molecules of this gray mass that even in the dark hours of the night, these blocks can offer you a home's warmth. The physical, heavy peace given by this tangible part of reality allows the complex plans turning in your mind to surrender. The weary yet solemn feeling of security a Hittite guard felt placing his hand on the sun-bathed stones of Anatolia's warm plateau walls in 1200 BC now becomes your sole reality. The stone's resistance to cooling is like your silent resistance to continue living and being confronted with this situation, but much calmer and more determined. As the air cools, this vapor-like warmth emitted by the stone weaves a visible cocoon, completely isolating you from the outside world. It is a heat as if the farthest and most tamed fragment of the immense magma beneath the earth had chosen to rest within these rocks. The collective lethargy of crowds waiting for the evening breeze on the marble theater steps in ancient Greece in midsummer now takes bodily form in your single-person world. As the stone's roughness leaves light marks on your back, each of these marks feels like silent words engraved on the spine of a thousand-year story. As your consciousness floats on the waves of this undying warmth like a raft, neither the shadows of the past nor the uncertainty of the future can reach you anymore. Only this deep, sleepy, and spread existence of the stone remains behind. It is so heavy that it seems to have given up on turning with the world and focuses only on preserving the heat on this summit. The uncanny yet protective atmosphere offered by the thick walls of Middle-earth castles that stored daylight is now exchanged here in its purest form with nature's own craftsmanship. When you surrender completely to the arms of this ancient mass, you feel gravity pulling you not downward but into the stone itself. With each breath, you add to the stone's thousand-year slow expansion and contraction. You are no longer a traveler or a bearer. You are just a part of the oldest and warmest stone on this summit. A silent witness sharing the sacred trust it received from the sun. The endless monotonous sound of the wind blowing sharp between the gray stones becomes not just a sound in your ears, but also a physical touch that numbs your mind. The air flow echoing in the labyrinthine crevices of Anatolia produces a different frequency grown each time it strikes a sharp rock edge, as if murmuring the world's oldest and weariest song for you. Between the razor-sharp limestone layers under your feet, the whistling rhythm of the ceaseless wind blurs the intervals and boundaries of space as much as your heavy breaths. In 400 BC, the uncanny yet hypnotic emptiness felt in the cells of the first caravans trying to find their way through Mesopotamia's steep mountain passes now seeps into a cell of yours. The high-pitched sound the air makes passing through the narrow gaps between the rocks files down all the complex pieces in your memory like a computer file, leaving behind only the ancient murmur of the wind. Each rock crack serves as a different note hole for the wind, and you feel like a tiny particle advancing within this massive stone-made flute. The cold and resisting wind felt at the contact of your fingertips with these sharp surfaces merges with the slight pressure it creates on your eardrum, completely severing you from the outside world. Only this deep, sleepy, and spread existence of the stone remains behind. It is so heavy that it seems to have given up on turning with the world and focuses only on preserving the heat on the summit. The uncanny yet protective atmosphere offered by the thick walls of Middle-earth castles that stored daylight is now exchanged here in its purest form with nature's own craftsmanship. When you surrender completely to the arms of this ancient mass, you feel gravity pulling you not downward but into the stone itself. With each breath, you add to the stone's thousand-year slow expansion and contraction. You are no longer a traveler or a bearer. You are just a part of the oldest and warmest stone on this summit. A silent witness sharing the sacred trust it received from the sun. The endless monotonous sound of the wind blowing sharp between the gray stones becomes not just a sound in your ears, but also a physical touch that numbs your mind. The air flow echoing in the labyrinthine crevices of Anatolia produces a different frequency grown each time it strikes a sharp rock edge, as if murmuring the world's oldest and weariest song for you. Between the razor-sharp limestone layers under your feet, the whistling rhythm of the ceaseless wind blurs the intervals and boundaries of space as much as your heavy breaths. In 400 BC, the uncanny yet hypnotic emptiness felt in the cells of the first caravans trying to find their way through Mesopotamia's steep mountain passes now seeps into a cell of yours. The high-pitched sound the air makes passing through the narrow gaps between the rocks files down all the complex pieces in your memory like a computer file, leaving behind only the ancient murmur of the wind. Each rock crack serves as a different note hole for the wind, and you feel like a tiny particle advancing within this massive stone-made flute. Completely take over your senses. Just as soldiers keeping watch on stone castle battlements in the dark winters of the Middle Ages embraced the wind's howl like a lullaby and surrendered to the moments they survived, you too can exchange your own identity within this sound. When the sharpness of the rocks combines with the wind, it is as if even the air turns into a solid substance and strips away all excesses, all anxieties, and all yourself as it touches you. The mental emptiness hermits walking at the foot of the Himalayas in the 8th century BC sought is now served to you on a golden platter with the monotony of this wild yet regular whistle sound. When you close your eyes just to listen, you can visualize the invisible paths the wind draws as it winds around a rock. This sound's never-ending, nowhere existence, and only revolving within itself shows you simultaneously how silent and how overwhelming eternity can be. This cold symphony among the stones creates a vacuum effect with the capacity to draw you into the deepest, most dreamless, and most layered stages of sleep. As your next breath slows in a strange harmony with the wind whistle outside, all the weight of your personality surrenders not to these sharp rocks but to the wind's visible arm. This sound no longer frightens you. On the contrary, you feel it has become the world's safest and most constant refuge. As the moon's cold, sharp light sifts over the rocks and scatters on the damp palms of the hands clinging below, you begin to hear more clearly the rhythmic and dynamic sounds coming from the moisture. The faint, vacuum-like timbre of this foreign creature's pale, damp palm soles meeting the hard stone ground resembles small water strikes piercing the night's absolute silence one by one. The transparent, slippery layer on the skin of each knuckle of its fingers gripping the rock merges with the dimensions of the rock's coldness, creating a hypnotic cycle in your mind. In 3000 BC, the squelchy yet regular sound made by the first potters in Mesopotamia's swampy banks as they dipped and withdrew their hands from clay now feels like a living counterpart of the motion echoing on the hilltop rocks. The sound born from the creature's progress becomes part of an uncanny rhythm nature murmurs to itself, sifting into your ears. The fine traces left by Gollum's membranous hands on the rock leaves glitter like silver seals under the moonlight and disappear hidden in seconds. This constant contact between skin and the stone's relentless hardness, combined with the muffled slap sound it produces, traps you in a deep, sleepy state. The slight pulling sound made by the suction cup-like grip on the fingertips creates a light detachment sound, continuing as regularly and unceasingly as a clock's pendulum. The monotonous dripping sounds of water leaks on stone floors and the massive cisterns of first-century Rome now flow in the same living order as the sound of this creature's silent advance in this dark passage. The sound's intensity never increases. Only its timbre shifts slightly from high to low as the stone's texture changes, and this change draws your consciousness even lower into the depths of a silent sea. The metallic reflection the moonlight creates on the surface of its breath tires the eyes with light plays that can be realized with a single hand movement, while the wet pattering sounds in your ear completely empty the mind. The squelchy sound of the thin liquid layer on the creature's ample hands, a mixture of sweat and marsh water, striking the rough limestone each time lingers in the cold night air and echoes. The rhythmic sound coming from the endless and regular hand movements of copyists pressing and heating papyrus in ancient Egypt seems like an ancient echo of that foreign yet recorded sound in this dark passage. The rhythm of these hands advancing like a shadow gliding over the ground, with no muscle straining, also slows your own heartbeat, waiting for it to adapt to nature's this primitive and monotonous pulse. The sound of each finger joint clinging and rubbing against the rock has an effect as continuous as an earthquake's rumble, while being as light as a phantom's footsteps in your soul. The damp exchange of the creature's ample hands with the stone takes the night inward, turning into a denser and stickier sensory experience. The soft yet rhythmic rustle from the cloths of servants wiping the wet floors of Assyrian palaces in the 8th century BC now meets the timbre coming from this mysterious creature's hands at the same intensity and frequency. The short pauses in the clinging sound create the interval for the next wet slap, focusing your mind on a single sensation while causing all other worldly troubles to evaporate in that moment. The dry clicks made as the finger knuckles grip and rub blend perfectly with the hand's broad, sucking sound in the fine cracks. This sequence of sounds lulls your consciousness, challenging its boundaries as simply as a lullaby and as inevitably as a natural phenomenon, leaving you in the arms of a heavy lethargy. The minimal and regular sounds made by scribes dripping ink on leather parchments in the silent monasteries of the Middle Ages share the same standard tranquility with the grainy and damp timbre in each step of this creature. When you close your eyes, you can imagine the silver rings formed in your memory by the sound of those wet hands expanding and washing ashore in the depths. Everything repeats so slowly, so monotonously, and so safely that it becomes impossible for excluded dangers to breach this sound's wall. The damp scent emanating from Gollum's hands, combined with the mineral scent of the stone and carried to you by the wind, further strengthens the sound's physical setup. The sound's permanent ricocheting and softening in the crevices of the rocks caresses your ears like a whisper dampened in the acoustic spaces of a cathedral. The endless and sleep-inducing work tempo of the piled structures in the clay buildings of the Indus Valley in 2000 BC is now a manifestation from thousands of years ago of this hypnotic effect upon you. These sounds are not calling you anywhere. They just exist here and now, telling you to stand here and just breathe under this light. The cool, sticky sound of the wetness lingers in the air one last time and then yields only to the night's own stillness. As your mind increasingly yields to the legacy of this sound, it begins to fall like a heavy stone towards the deep, black, and absolute peace-filled classrooms of sleep where no image or sound can reach. As each breath of yours lightens and vanishes as faintly as the creature's last fingerprint on the rock, it draws you completely into the depths as part of this monotonous and ancient rhythm. When you fix your eyes on this wide and motionless expanse of water, the color palette you encounter is completely stripped of living, vibrant tones, consisting of a dirty, pale, and metallic gray mixed with a faded yellow, as if representing death and decay. The sulphurous, sickly green layer on the water's surface does not reflect light. Instead, it resembles an ancient mirror that absorbs and destroys. The color of this stagnant liquid bears great resemblance to the heavy, uncanny brown and acidic tones surrounding the preserved corpses that remained undecomposed for thousands of years in the oxygenless depths of northern Europe's peat bogs from 1,000 years BC. The oily film accumulating on each square centimeter spreads in patterns similar to the color play on the water's surface. But these are actually signs not of nature but of decay and chemical regularity. When you turn your gaze to the deepest points of the water, you notice the dark leaden color there remains motionless like cooled molten metal, and you sense that everything is ultimately hidden beneath it. This color carries the same guided tonality as the tone of the stagnant waters accumulating outside cities after the Great Plague epidemics in the late Middle Ages, which no one dared to touch. The dense, grainy texture formed by the moss and algae on the water's surface completely cuts off the air-water contact like a crust on the world's skin. While the weakest movements in this layer are covered in a matte olive green that refuses to shine, you can sense that the water in the lower layers is actually of an analytical ink-like consistency, not completely transparent. Imagining that the darkest and dirtiest tones of the famous murex dyes used in ancient Phoenicia are recreated in the depths of this marsh drags your mind even deeper into this monotonous color spectacle. The light's expansion and refraction a few centimeters beyond the water causes the decayed plant fibers under the oily trace layer on the surface to form like ghostly shadows. The intense opaque and light-absorbing water structure seen in the coal-black riverbeds of 19th-century industrial production now manifests itself in the natural yet recorded ecosystem of this ancient marsh before you. The color of the marsh's shallowest regions turns into the reddish-brown hue of rusted iron, evoking the sensation that the place you left is bleeding. The similarity of this rusty tone with the metallic and heavy color character created by the sediments accumulating in the neglected water cisterns of 4th century AD Rome finds an echo in the dusty corners of memory. The stagnant foam on the water, bleached by escaping sulfur gas, glows and fades like uncanny stars within all this dark and gloomy landscape. Each puddle is like a closed universe within itself, refusing the blue of the clean sky outside and reflecting only the marsh's own gray and smoky atmosphere. The earth tones and dirty whites in the most melancholic nature scenes of 17th century Dutch painters now transform into the lifeless and participative color transitions in this water system. Looking a bit closer at the water, you notice the cloudy layer formed by microscopic organisms on the surface sometimes takes on an open ash color, sometimes the pale lividity of a corpse's skin. This variable yet always depressing pigmentation stands before you as a much harsher and more relentless version of the scientific narratives about how papyrus roots darken the water's color in the marsh regions of ancient Egypt. The air's stillness and the absence of water flow prevent the colors from mixing, allowing each depth to hide like a solidified paint layer within itself. The dark green and black mixture the Thames River assumed during London's Great Stink period in the Victorian era now merges at the same frequency with the heavy, damp, and metallic atmosphere emitted by this marsh. Where the water merges with the mud in the center, you are invited to the points where the colors become completely opaque and turn into asphalt blackness at the furthest boundary of your mind. The absolute blackness at these points offers a hypnotic stillness identical to the matte and sticky appearance of natural tar seeps in Mesopotamia under the sun in 5000 BC. When your eyes tire from these monotonous color games and begin to close, the dirty color of the marsh water turns into a curtain that extinguishes the last crumbs of light in your mind. With each breath, you slow down a bit more with the vapor of this heavy-smelling, gray water, and you fall like a heavy stone into the bottomless and colorless well of sleep. When you fix your eyes on Mordor's relentless heights, the black gates stretching between the massive iron towers tearing the sky like a knife defines itself before you not just as a passage but as the absolute final point where the world holds its breath. The metallic echoes sifting between the massive teeth from the clash of the iron wings and striking Mordor's bare mountains spreads in the deepest corners of your mind like a cold, sharp ache. This echo resembles no sound ever heard. It carries both the sediment of 1,000-year hatred and the endless cry of the iron's own internal corrosion. The solid, dominant sound echoing from the drawing of the bolts on the Hittites' massive bronze doors in 1200 BC now remains only like a light breeze next to this relentless and corroded metallic noise before you. The pitted and orange-black texture of rust completely hides the iron's original color on the spiked protrusions rising like massive teeth upwards on the gate, giving it an uncanny vitality. The wind's passage through these massive parts combines with the rhythmic screeching of the thin iron fittings, forming a hypnotic frequency in your ears. This screeching seems to articulate the creaking of a gigantic creature's joint pains and is supported by a muffled rumble from the depths with its every meter of movement. The absolute feeling of isolation created by the impassable castle gates the Urartu kings built on steep cliffs in the 8th century BC now burdens your soul with the same psychological weight as the metallic echo here at this massive and rusty gate. When you bring your palms close to the gate, you notice the metal dust in the air burns your sinuses and each sound wave creates a tangible hollow in your chest. This sound, instead of protecting you, repeats so monotonously and inevitably that it slowly drags your consciousness into this gray and rusty eternity. Each clanging sound echoing in the massive space between the iron wings shatters and dampens on the stone walls, reminding you once again how meaningless time is here. The dampness seeping between the rust layers combines with the iron's expansion and contraction, forming a secret language as if the gate is murmuring to itself. The heavy and hollow noise of the massive cathedral doors built in the late Middle Ages creates a different dimension in your mind with the relentless, mechanical, and cold timbre in this dark passage. The sound's reverberation time is so long that a new strike joins before the previous one fades, producing only a hum specific to this place. This hum is the very vertical corridor that forces all the muscles in your body to relax, breaks resistance, and prepares you for absolute surrender. With each metallic clash scattering a visible cloud of rust, you can even hear the micro-level silence of this dust dissolving on the ground. The gaps between the gate's massive teeth act like a sound vacuum, sucking in all hopeful tones from outside and grinding them with this rusty, metallic reverberation. The heavy, oily rhythm of the first steam machines of the 18th century now creates effects on you at the same temperature as the monotonous sounds rising from the gaps of this ancient gate. Your eyelids grow heavier and drift downward in the short moments of silence when an echo fades. This echo does not frighten you. Like the regular rocking of a cradle, it invites you into the deepest layers of this smoky and metallic dream. One last time, that distant, muffled, and metallic sound imprisons the last beam of light in your mind behind those massive iron wings. Now neither Mordor's fire nor the day's fatigue holds any importance. Only your being remains, melting and vanishing within this metallic reverberation, forgetting time and the entire world. Like the regular rhythm of water droplets echoing in the depths of an abandoned iron mine in the 10th century AD, this gate's sound also leaves you in an eternal and peaceful darkness, to sleep's safest harbor. When you step from the shadow-clad mountains into Ithilion's deep and cool valleys, the first scent lingering in the air that greets you is not just a burning smell but like an ancient elixir of tranquility seeping into the deepest layers of your soul. The sharp yet worn aroma of wild thyme, crushed laurel, and crushed myrtle crushed under the soft, damp soil fills your lungs with each breath, sweeping away the smoky and dirty Mordor memories from your mind one by one. This aromatic feast carries a similar depth and regional weight to the heavy and noble perfumes emitted by exotic blends selected and cultivated for rulers to find peace in Mesopotamia's hanging gardens in 3000 BC. The wind sifting among the surrounding plants carries the essence of wild sage and flowering heather to you, and your breath takes on a slower and more controlled rhythm than before. The healthy plant distribution in the air recalls the off-filled atmosphere created by the dried mint and lemon balm bundles hung in the healing herb gardens of great monasteries in late medieval Europe. The weak sunlight filtering through the leaves heats the damp mosses and the resins on the juniper tree trunks, causing them to release a denser vapor. Advancing within this dense scent cloud, even the presence of the heavy metal around your neck is crushed and silenced under the false yet peaceful feeling of security created by this natural perfume. The humid comfort created by fresh flowers scattered in the corridors and aromatic herbs burned to welcome guests in the most luxurious villas of ancient Rome now coincides with the accidental calm in this secluded and uncanny place you found. With each step, the mixture of fine dust and pollen rising from the ground leaves a sweet coolness in your sinuses while you feel all the muscles in your body surrender to this monotonous and rich scent quality. The exotic scent seeping from the sacks of valuable spices carried by caravans along the Silk Road before the 8th century BC is now reblended by Ithilion's hidden grove with its own natural hands. The damp coolness of the ferns along the path you walk balances the high-pitched scents of the aromatic herbs with a more earthy bass note. This balance drags your consciousness into a dream state that cannot be found anywhere but fills its memory, like the delicate ratios a master perfumer uses while creating his rarest work. The mystical and complex structure of the Kifi incense offered to gods in ancient Egyptian temples now takes bodily form in Athelian's natural vegetation without human touch, only with the help of sun and wind. When your eyes are closed for a moment, you realize you could map this geography solely through sense, sensing through these aromatic paths which direction the pine forests lie, which way the steep cliffs are. As darkness begins to fall and the air temperature drops, the oily and essential scents secreted become even heavier and begin to lie on the ground like a thin fog layer. This heaviness creates the same activity as the drowsy scent of herbs and flowers seeping from glass jars in the dim and damp apothecary shops of the late 19th century. Each breath you take feels like capturing a piece of this plant history in your lungs and belonging to these lands with it. The intoxicating scent emitted by musk herbs and jasmines planted along the water channels and Andalusian gardens in the 10th century AD now becomes the sole reality of your uncanny journey. As your mind settles into this endless and continuously ongoing yet always equally calm scent, all its weight prepares to fall like a leaf onto this storage layer. The micro-level whispers emitted by the plants tell you the world's oldest stories in the language of sense while you now drift away, becoming only a part that breathes and gets lost in this aromatic universe. Everything is so slow, so natural, and so fragrant that there remains no obstacle to pass into the deepest and most healing layer of sleep. These scents carry you away from Mordor's ashes and deliver you precisely to the silver-gray memories of a forgotten paradise. When you turn your eyes to the uncanny tower, you begin to watch how Minas Morgul's brain is observed with a slow and heavy motion among the pale green light clouds seeping towards the sky like poison. This light does not resemble the warm green tone carried by any beginning or creature in nature. Instead, it spreads into the sky like a phosphorescent fog layer over the cold and diseased glow of a decaying metal. The light's movement in the sky is so heavy that it resembles the hypnotic persistence of incense smoke rising in a windless room, and it vibrates at a frequency that numbs your mind part by part. The uncanny and suffocating atmosphere formed by volcanic gases combining with sunlight in the skies of Pompeii buried under the ashes of Mount Vesuvius in 79 BC now possesses a similar historical weight to the deep uneasiness created by this pale green light upon you. The light's dispersion among the cloud fragments like a liquid gives the sensation that the sky is a wounded organism and this dead essence circulates in its veins. As each light beam fades slower and more broadly than the previous one, your pupils have no duty but to adapt to this rhythm. The shadows cast by this pale light on the stones take on a deep mixture of purple and gray instead of the sharp blackness you're accustomed to, transforming the surrounding world into a dream realm. The hallucinatory atmosphere created by the sickly green vapor released when copper met strong acids in the dark alchemy laboratories of the Middle Ages is now inoculated into your soul at the same temperature in this environment affecting Minas Morgul's sky. The monotonous continuity in the light's movement shakes your belief that time flows as you know it. It makes you feel as if everything has lived within this greenness and been trapped in an eternal continuum. The moisture in the air absorbs this light, forming a visible but tangible heaviness. This causes a metallic coolness to fill your lungs with each breath. The spiritual and cold youth formations and ancient fears believed to seep from the gates of Duat, the underworld in ancient Egypt, now revive in each unit of this green light. The reason you cannot tear your gaze from this light is not because it frightens you, but because it hypnotically dissolves your free will. Watching the light reach the highest cloud layers and disperse there like an oil stain disables all defense mechanisms in your mind, preparing you for absolute surrender. The metallic patches seen in the diseased evenings of the late 19th century industrial allocation, when coal smoke and chemical waste covered the sky like a fog curtain, now meet with the same artificiality as this ancient and malignant light of Minas Morgul. The fact that there is no slight change in intensity makes you sense that the light is not limited to your eyes, but is an energy seeping into all your body's tissues. This green leakage serves the same purpose as the uncanny luminescence emitted by a deep-sea anglerfish to lure its prey, rather than a light's guiding brightness. The warm and secure system offered by the sacred fires burned on the altars of Babylonian towers before the 6th century BC now remains like a forgotten memory at a completely opposite pole next to this cold green light. Each oscillation of the light in the sky causes your heartbeat to slow a bit more, your shoulder muscles to completely relax under this supernatural pressure. This relaxation comes not from peace but more from the inevitable submission to a great power, and it brings you to the continuity of a deep, dreamless sleep. The ash particles in the air glitter like diamond dust under this green light and then hide, emphasizing the world's transience with monotonous visuality. Just as the mysterious lights rising from marshes in medieval Europe, called will-o'-the-wisps, led travelers into the unknown, this green sky also draws your consciousness into its depths. Everything moves so silently and so regularly that after a while you focus only on this light's existence and its endless, pale oscillation. Like the strange light phenomena seen in the sky in ancient Rome's darkest moments interpreted as harbingers of disaster, this green color also shows you how calm the great formations approaching you can actually be. When your eyelids can no longer withstand the light's heavy wavelength and close, the last image remaining in your mind is the green colors sifting among the clouds. This light envelopes you, embraces you, and reduces all your physical existence to a dust speck in the shadow of that massive tower, leaving you in the bottomless well of sleep. Now neither Mordor's gates nor the heavy trust you carry hold any importance. Only a soul remains, melting and vanishing within this green eternity, forgetting time and the world. As each breath of yours fades in harmony with the rhythm of the green light outside, you now completely become part of this uncanny yet monotonous universe. When the merciless hardness of the first stone step under your feet combines with the first pressure bearing on your knees, you begin to sense that the dark vertical tunnel stretching upward has no end. Each step is not just an ascent, it also becomes the beginning of a monotonous and silent war against gravity. The stair's steepness is so extreme that you must lean forward with every move, and this position makes your breaths more labored, deepening your mind to focus solely on the current physical effort. In the 15th century BC, the oxygen-depriving feeling that took the breath away from messengers sweating on the steep and breathtaking steps of Inca mountain paths to reach sacred peaks now revives in a cell of yours. The stones have been polished so smooth by time and relentless weather that when you try to cling to the side walls with your fingertips, the stone's cold and slippery texture whispers the world's oldest and deafest secrets to you. Your eyes try to discern only where the next step ends while the pitch darkness around draws you in like a pit. Each step appears higher and narrower than the previous one, deceiving your mind as if in a labyrinth. The claustrophobic and endless vertical progression of laborers slowly moving massive granite blocks upward in the dark and narrow corridors of the Great Pyramid in 2500 BC now echoes in every second of yours on these stairs. The rhythmic burning in your calf muscles stops hurting after a while and turns into a monotony. This automatizes your movements like machine gears. The chain around your neck strikes your chest harder wherever the staircase steepens, and that cold metal sound echoes on the stone walls, forming a sleepy melody. You notice the air gradually thinning and the sharp, dusty, and damp stone subscription in your sinuses with each breath. This scent fills your lungs like a strange mixture of a cave stagnation that hasn't seen sunlight for centuries and Mordor's sooty air from afar. The metallic weariness and eternal warriors' muffled echo created by the iron rings on the necks of slaves working in the Roman Empire's deep stone quarries in the 1st century AD now meets with a similar traditional weight to the physical fatigue created by your chain in this dark ascent. Your mind has stopped keeping count of steps. You have now surrendered solely to the primitive and endless rhythm recorded by your muscles contracting and relaxing. Each stone threshold stands unshaken under your feet like a small scale pen measuring your will. And in this stability, you understand once again how temporary your existence is. Even the imagination of where the steps end fades from your mind, and you only hear yourself being dragged in this flowing stone river upward. The mystical and exhausting awe that priests felt as they climbed the massive ziggurats of Babylon in the 6th century BC, feeling a bit closer to the sky with each step, now yields to absolute physical exhaustion. This exhaustion, instead of frightening you, silences all unnecessary sounds in your mind, preparing you for the deepest and most silent valley of sleep. Each crack under your feet, every roughness your hand strikes, tells you in a monotonous language how ancient and relentless this path is. Your eyelids grow heavier against the never-changing and self-repeating structure of the staircase, offering more resistance. After a while, you reach a state where you cannot tell whether you are climbing up or actually repeating the same step in an endless cycle. The spiritual and mechanical capability of a monk climbing a monastery's bell tower every morning with the same weariness in the 11th century AD now becomes the summary of your existence on this staircase. The muffled hum of the wind sifting down from above through this narrow passage combines with your heavy and regular breaths, leading you to the warmth of a hypnotic sleep. Each step echoes like a silent blow struck towards the world's heart, and you can exchange your own identity within this echo. Finally, under the monotonous sovereignty of the steepness and stone, you turn into just a moving shadow. The texture of the living web you first encounter with physical contact as you advance in the darkest, most forgotten corridors where the visible obstacles hang in the air. The webs are covered with a substance that resembles no spider's labor you know, as cold as frozen pain and as sticky as freshly poured pitch. When your fingertips touch this life, you feel it doesn't just cling with force but grips you like living organisms trying to seep into your skin's pores. The smoothness of the rare silks produced in China's secret gardens in 3000 BC now remains like a childish attempt next to the webs in this dark tunnel. Because the texture here is the agent not of softness but of relentless captivity. Although each thread is as strong as an iron wire, it slips between your fingers like a snake due to the transparent liquid, leaving behind an icy trace. This coolness is not like touching a marble block with bare hands in midwinter. It is more of a metallic and biological chill that drains the innermost fire of the soul. As you pass through the web, you notice that even a dust particle on your clothing is drawn to this sticky layer, and the space you move in narrows millimeter by millimeter. The heavy and knotted nets used by retiarious gladiators in 1st century Roman arenas to immobilize opponents now appear as crude toys next to the delicate yet tenacious threads enveloping you. The texture of the webs themselves is the product of an excessively intricate craftsmanship that would make you think they were woven like lace and then solidified here. The sticky liquid on them thickens into a gel consistency instead of drying upon contact with air, and with each struggle, it buries you in a deeper silence. The stale, damp scent belonging to a very ancient death coming to your nose, combined with the chemical sharpness emanating from the web's texture, pushes your mind behind a heavy fog curtain. As you advance by feel in the darkness, each new layer of texture your hand strikes feels thicker and more resistant than the previous one. The intricate patterns embroidered blindingly finely by Europe's most masterful lace producers in the 17th century now remain like faint shadows next to the random yet perfect geometry of the webs in this massive tunnel. Each knot point offers an unshakable integrity, as if collecting all the world's weight in a single place. Learning that these cold and lukewarm fibers touching your skin are actually the product of a wool that hasn't seen sunlight for thousands of years adds a mental numbness on top of physical fatigue. This numbness seeps into your soul at the same frequency as the sweet yet dangerous invitation to sleep a traveler feels when trapped in a snowstorm. The micro-level crackles produced by the web's movement create a sound universe like thousands of tiny explosions breaking simultaneously. The dryness and hardness of the thousands of meters of linen fabric wrapping mummies in ancient Egypt in 2000 BC completely contrasts with the uncanny comfort offered by the damp and flexible fringes in this tunnel. Here, the texture is designed not to protect you but to completely isolate you from the rest of the world and transform you into a silent statue. Each of the fine threads left by your fingers applies a monotonous pressure that slows your heart's beating rhythm. This pressure becomes uncomfortable after a while and then ceases, pushing you towards absolute surrender, that eternal stillness that permits nothing to move. When you close your eyes, you imagine the webs wrapping you like a cocoon and all the wars, noises, and duties gathered from outside melting away behind these texture layers. The oily rhythm released by the immense weaving looms during the 19th century Industrial Revolution is meaningless complexity next to the absolute and provider silence created by the webs in this silent tunnel. Within this silence, you begin to hear the slight, almost imperceptible vibrations in the web's texture. This is the proliferation and monotonous breathing of the ancient creatures under this place. Now you too become part of this domain. The coldness gives way to warmth, and the stickiness seals you to this moment. As your consciousness remains divided between this silver and dark life, you drift effortlessly towards the deepest, stickiest, and most peaceful place of sleep. You begin to watch the gray dust particles falling from the leaden sky spread like a heavy ceiling over Gorgorotha's endless cracked lands, pouring down as if the firmament itself were crumbling in due time. These ashes do not fall rapidly to the ground like fresh snowflakes on known winter mornings. They drift with the rhythm of invisible currents in such dense and motionless air, appearing like ghosts. Each burned mineral piece alights gently on your shoulders, hair, and hands as tired envoys of the ancient and relentless heat from the depths of Mount Doom. The dense and suffocating ash rain that silently shrouded Pompeii's streets like a shroud with the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD now carries a heavy calm to your soul as a traditional projection of this smoky and gray eternity you are in. The fine torture of the air where oxygen should be leaves a metallic, sooty, and bone-dry taste in your sinuses with each filling, melting your last bonds with the outside world within this atmosphere. Each particle falling on your eyelid pulls your gaze further downward towards that cracked and blackened ground like tiny seals carrying the weight of sleep for thousands of years. The chaotic yet slow intermittent movements the ashes draw in the air file down all the sharp edges and plans in your mind one by one, preparing you for an absolute void. Within this dust cloud, visibility narrows so much that you feel the persistence of the broken illusion, and the remaining parts of reality are erased, and you only hear the success of this gray rain beside you. The darkness, monotony, and merging atmosphere created by the incessant coal soot and chemical smoke raining from the sky on London streets during the Industrial Revolution's most intense period in the 19th century now confront you in a much more ancient and relentless form in Gorgorotha's volcanic deserts. This fine layer not touching you dries your body's natural moisture, continuing to render you motionless and silent like a statue. While in this plane where not even the wind visits, You can only hear the endless cutting sound in a sleepy manner. This sound is actually the very essence of absolute silence. The unheard but deeply hissing sound of the ashes falling to the ground with feather lightness without collision hypnotizes you. When you move your fingers in the air, watching the ashes flow through your fingers like water and disappear without leaving any trace behind, destroys all your daily perception of analysis. The absolute and leaden darkness that buried the Aegean Sea for weeks with the massive eruption of the Thera volcano in 1450 BC now revives in every breath of yours. These ashes are not just the remnants of a burned mountain. They are also a very thick sound-absorbing layer for all the world's noises. Each particle alighting on an object blurs its outlines, cloaking it in Gorgorotha's monotonous and gray identity. Watching a stone set aside by the path or a dried bush amount vanish under this dust layer, you hear how your own existence also melts within this immense landscape. When the air's temperature combines with the deep hum coming from underground, the drifting of the ashes turns into the slowest scene of a dream. The endless afternoon feeling created by the dry fog and accumulated dust that settled over all Europe for months as a result of the Loki eruption in Iceland in 1783 AD now becomes the sole reality of your journey. The color of the ashes offers a palette where thousands of gray tones mix from pitch black to light ash, tiring your eye without inviting you to the deepest layers of your sleep. It rains in such a way that it seems the sky has decided to descend to earth, and everything is watched in an eternal rest within this smoky embrace. You notice your body growing heavier, becoming a bit more grounded with each particle, and sinking deeper into this gray dust, and that moving your body is an unnecessary effort. The earthy, shallow, and mineral-based taste the ashes leave on your lips reminds you of the world's oldest and most unspoiled state, while your consciousness is completely lost behind this misty curtain. Like each snowflake falling from the sky in the 18th century actually uniting with a dust particle and being condemned to poverty, these ashes also map your will and memories in winter. Now neither Mordor's gates nor the green Shire left behind hold any importance. Only this grey drift, this endless falling, and this smoky peace remain. As each breath of yours harmonizes with the slowness of the ash storm outside, you too freeze like a statue within this volcanic dream and fall like a heavy stone towards the safest, darkest, and most monotonous shelter of sleep. When you kneel, the scorched burgundy redness under your palms is not just a color. It begins to seep into your skin like the silent and still state of an ancient cry from the earth's depths. This soil has completely broken away from the moist and cool brown of the salesman, having abandoned all minerals that once contained life in the relentless embrace of high heat, turning into just a pile of embers. When your fingertips touch these rough, tiny formed red particles, you feel the heat doesn't just remain on the surface but seeps into your bones like a pulse from deep within, harmonizing with the rhythm of your blood. The intense and dry heat emitted by the first mud bricks baked for days under the sun in Mesopotamia in 4000 BC now has a similar origin to the absolute and eternal heat provided by this volcanic ground under your hands. In this point where even the air's oxygen is weighed down by this red dust, you sense the metallic taste resembling iron rust and burns sulfur in your sinuses with each breath. When you fix your eyes on this endless redness, you notice a shaky curtain obscuring your vision from the faint but effective radiation seeping from each crack in the ground. Each particle of the red domain seems to have separated from Mount Doom's massive and dark masses, then drifted downward and solidified here like small lava droplets. The suffocating thermal energy felt during the infamous minutes when the lava flows of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD reached its foothills and turned the environment into a furnace floor now resonates in every cell of yours at the same frequency as this heat seeping in. As your body weight presses more on this red ground, you discover its soft yet burning nature that wants to suck you into its particles like quicksand instead of pushing you upward. This heat is not sudden and aggressive like sunstroke. On the contrary, it advances with a heavy, monotonous, and resistance-breaking stability like the cooling phase of liquid metal in a founderman's hand. When the weight of the terrible burden on your shoulders combines with this ground heat, it feels more like disrespect against this red piece than a physical impossibility of movement. The soil's color shows variability ranging from deep brick red to a burgundy tone almost bordering on black. But that undying heat never changes. The feeling of absolute helplessness and surrender a peasant felt on the sun-scorched and cracked lands of central Anatolia during the great famines of the 19th century now revives in you, completely numbed by this red dust. The fine red dust cloud raised with each hand movement refracts sunlight like a prism, trapping the surrounding in the hazy and smoky atmosphere of a dream realm. The velvety yet bone-dry layer this dust leaves on your skin whispers to you every second in an increasingly monotonous language how far away water and moisture are as a fairy tale. As your mind floats among these never-ending and continuously repeating vertical heat waves, it crumbles into dust like this soil. The temperature at this extreme limit of the Earth's crust carries a sanctity and seriousness, as if tasked with preserving the first ember from the world's creation moment. The used fire character of the massive melting furnaces of the Hittites in 1200 BC, where the surrounding ground became irreversibly hot, now turns into the system in every centimeter of Mount Doom's foothills covered in red. As your knees become accustomed to the pain in this heat, a strange lightness and absolute submission to gravity begins. This heat is a much darker and ancient version of the comfort of being rocked in a cradle. The very fine smoke rising from the micro cracks in the soil rises straight up in the windless air, carrying your consciousness also towards the gray ceiling of the sky along these vertical lines. The rough power of the red dust winding around your knuckles reminds you that time flows here not like in an hourglass, but with the speed of transformation into stone. Like a traveler walking on the streets of a city covered in ash and embers after a great fire in the 14th century AD, feeling the insidious heat climbing from the soles of his feet, you too become part of this geography, warming up every second. Everything is so slow, so red, and so monotonous that you can no longer find in yourself the mental physicality needed to remember the Shire's cool fountains or Ithilion's silver waters. Only this ground remains. This red, smoky, and eternally fire-cloaked state remains as your sole reality. As your eyelids drift downward, drying even your tear ducts with this monotonous heat's pores, the last image in your mind becomes the faint red glow seeping from the cracks. This ground in this form calls you, and you respond to this call with great peace, as if entering the world's oldest and hottest shelter. Each breath of yours slows a bit more with the heavy metallic aroma in this red dust, and you are now drawn completely into your own depth as part of this volcanic peace. The pressure each of the metal rings around your neck makes on your skin carries not the lightness of an ordinary ornament, but the relentless weight of a well chain, and with each step, you feel the strange bargaining of this load with gravity. When the chain's rough surfaces establish contact with the sensitive skin on your nape, they leave a numb acceptance in place of the micro-level resistance your nerves show against this cold and foreign substance. The metallic tensions traveling sound echoes in your marrow like a muffled click audible only through bone conduction, turning into a monotonous rhythm that drowns out all other noises in your mind. The constant and inevitable pressure created by the forged iron rings placed on the necks of slaves working in the Roman Empire's deep stone quarries in the 1st century AD now possesses a similar traditional weight to the physical fatigue created by your chain that carries an immense will. Each link of the chain hangs downward with its own independent weight instead of adapting to your unit's movement. And this vertical pull triggers a numbness spreading from the top of your spine throughout the skeleton. The damp slipperiness formed where sweat meets metal in that narrow area makes the chain's movement more insidious and irritating, while you understand once again in this feeling how dependent your existence is on matter. With each breath, your rib cage tightening a bit more to carry the chain's load causes this cyclical spread to offer you the physical restriction needed to pass through the deepest, most rhythmic compartments of sleep. The feelings of rulers in the late Middle Ages wearing massive and valuable metal chains on their shoulders during ceremonies, the weight of the heavy burden and the formed authority, now meet with the relentless seriousness offered by your chain on this dark journey. The red mark the chain leaves on your neck becomes more evident every second, like the physical proof of a visible hand constantly pulling you downward, towards the ancient silence of the ground. The metallic scent blending with the smell of your skin and filling your sinuses completely severs you from external forest scents or sea essence, imprisoning you only in this narrow and heavy circle. Your fingers can sometimes feel the thousands of small notches and abrasions on the chain's seemingly smooth surface. These notches look like tooth marks left on this chain by ours. The analytical traces and created endless feelings of the crude and rusty chains gathering prisoners returning from distant campaigns in ancient Egypt in 1200 BC now meet at the same known frequency as the heavy-headed pain created by this ancient trust around your neck. After a while, the chain's weight begins to be perceived as if a natural extension of your limbs, and this acceptance silences all alarm bells in your nervous system, inviting you to the strange peace at the heart of deep unease. As your movements slow, the chain's swing also decreases, and that heavy metal reinforcement remains motionless like a stone placed on your chest, continuing to apply pressure that slows your heartbeat. The very fine creak produced by the micro gaps in the integration interval of each link works like the smallest and most monotonous clock intervals of the world. The analytical volume sounds distributed by the massive industrial ships of the 19th century transferring anchor chains from huge winches are like a massive echo of the micro-level acoustic world created by this thin chain around your neck. This sound does not follow you. Instead, it fixes your mind to a single frequency, pushing all external dangers and anxieties behind a curtain of mist. The constant pressure on your neck forces even the rhythm of blood going to your brain to adjust according to this weight, and this continuously escorts you towards the gray, smoky, and absolute silence-filled corridors of sleep. The chain's metal warms at exactly the same rate as your body temperature, and you reach a point where you cannot tell where it ends and your skin begins. Under the metal's absolute sovereignty, you notice that your will statements also become heavy like those chains and transform into a mass. The paced and spiritual calmness lived by hermit monks in the 11th century wearing heavy iron belts and chains around their clothes to dull their flesh now revives in your current physical submission. The chain is no longer a burden. It serves as a massive anchor fixing you to this world and this moment. As it draws you towards the bottomless and dark seas of dreams, you live to the point of that strange lightness of being lost within this weight. Each breath of yours synchronizes with the chain's slight tension and relaxation around your neck, and you leave your own identity in the shape of those cold links. When the pull on the relentless ground under your feet finally ends and the burden is placed on Sam's faithful shoulders like a trust, a feeling of surrender beyond any fear you have ever tasted begins to sprout in the deepest corners of your soul. Despite the sharp sulfur smell lingering in the air and Mount Doom's suffocating heat, the peace of the old, worn Shire wool cloak on Sam's back comes to you like a final harbor whispering the Shire's cool hills and peaceful evenings to your fingertips. When you leave all your body's weight, your own will, and the immense pressures of the terrible burden you carry on his bony yet unshakable shoulders, the endless struggle with gravity yields to a rhythmic and healthy rocking. The absolute trust in shared power and common destiny felt by thousands of workers carrying the massive blocks of the Giza pyramids at the end of the day in 2500 BC now carries a similar human depth with the strength or unshakable detachment in each of Sam's steps. Sam's regular, heavy, and determined breaths resonate in your chest like a drum, slowing your heartbeat and reliably preparing you for the most protected, most dreamless plane of sleep. When you rest your head on his shoulder, the faint scent of soil and tobacco seeping through his hair clears your mind like a silver beam of light piercing Mordor's sooty air while simultaneously dragging you into deep lethargy. With each renewed tension of Sam's muscles' contraction, you feel the power in his own voice, hearing how his strength balances the exhaustion in your veins like a pendulum. The burden of sacrifice on the shoulders of a loyal legionnaire carrying a wounded general on his shoulders to the rear ranks on an ancient Roman battlefield, and the absolute desire to keep the carried one alive, is a reflection of the final security force you experience on these barren walks. You no longer need to follow the path, cling to rocks, or guard against danger. Just surrendering yourself to this rhythm, this warmth, and this unshakable loyalty is enough. The cracking of stones under Sam's feet turns into a monotonous melody that silences all the noises in the rest of the world, bringing down the last defense castles in your mind one by one. As your eyelids drift downward without further resistance against this developed hypnotic motion of the journey, you reach a point where you cannot tell where the ground ends and where Sam begins. This is the purest form of the unquestioning feeling of safety a child feels falling asleep on a parent's shoulder at the end of a long journey, found in the darkest region of the world. The endless, unhalting, and confidence-giving walking rhythm of mule caravans carrying heavy loads through the steep mountain passes of the late Middle Ages is now another time projection of the mechanical yet therapy-filled progression that numbs your consciousness. Each of his strides seems to close a crack in your soul, immediately placing you away from the sharp metallic coldness of the burden on your shoulders into a human warmth. Even the air's increasing heaviness and the fire's burning intensity remain merely a distant detail for you within this small and safe cocoon. Sam's hands gripping your legs become the most concrete and heavy-headed feeling, proving that an unbreakable bond still exists in this world. In this grasp, you can find neither questioning nor signs of fatigue. There is only the undying essence of an eternal watch and endless friendship. The supreme dedication, absolute balance, and unshakable discipline shown by trained guards carrying the Assyrian king's massive palanquin in the 8th century BC now find a more sincere response in Sam's determined yet effortless walking on these steep slopes. As the images in your mind fade, only the soft rises on Sam's back and the rhythmic breaths you hear immediately with your ear remain. These seep into your soul like the lowest performing notes of 1,000 lullabies, escorting you towards the bottomless and dark well of sleep, the birthplace of absolute peace where no shadow can reach you. As you approach the journey's end, this feeling of trust intensifies even more deeply, transforming into a physical existence and completely isolating you from all unreal realities of the dream world. Now neither Mordor's ashes nor Mount Doom's cries can breach this security shield. You just glide like a passenger obtained within the small and safe cocoon on Sam's back. The rough yet confidence-giving rhythm of burly porters carrying weary sailors to ships in the foggy ports of the 19th century now merges at the same frequency with the accidental yet eternal calm you found at the end of this uncanny journey. As each breath of yours shortens and slows in harmony with Sam's steps, it finally delivers you to the most healing, heaviest, and safest harbor of sleep. Now only this moment exists. This warmth, this pace, and this endless, undying feeling of trust is the sole truth. The rumble rising from the deep and bottomless chasms of the crack of doom strikes your ears not as an ordinary sound but spreads like a low-frequency, ancient pulse that vibrates all parts of your body like a massive bronze bell. You not only see with your eyes the movement of each lava wave, thick and viscous. You feel the micro-tremors created by the immense weight of that dense liquid on the ground in every cell of yours, starting from the soles of your feet up to your knees and then to your rib cage. In 1600 BC, the muffled and internal roar made by the massive pressure accumulated in the chambers of Thera Island, known today as Santorini, as it strained the Earth's crust, now possesses a similar epidemic weight to the absolute and inevitable vertical sound you know in this corridor of doom. This sound echoing on the cave wall's obsidian surfaces is stripped of sharp tones. It begins to numb your mind merely as parts of the heavy and monotonous motion coming from within the earth. The air temperature changes momentarily with each lava bubble burst, and this change creates rhythmic pressure on your eardrum, severing you from all memories of the outside world and imprisoning you in this protective symphony. Each crack formation of the lavas, ranging from bright orange to pitch black, leaves a very fine and metallic ringing. But this ringing fades and vanishes within seconds in that deep rumble. The harsh yet regular air current sound of the most skilled iron masters of antiquity trying to control 1,000-degree heat in the Hittite Empire's massive casting furnaces now echoes in this natural furnace of the crack of doom in a much wilder and uncontrolled form. The flow sound of the liquid stones squeezing through the channel's narrow bottlenecks continues as heavily and unceasingly as the breath of a gigantic living being. This sound's never-changing tempo gradually disables the defense mechanisms in your brain, drawing you into a deep surrender. When you fix your eyes on that continuous river, you notice you have reached that hypnotic threshold where sound and image mix, senses melt into each other. Each burst launches thousands of small guides, and even the impact sound of these guides remains as silent as dust particles before the majesty of that massive rumble. The steamy and dense noise made when lava rivers met ice in Iceland's steep cliffs in the 7th century AD now meets at the same temperature frequency as the dry and metallic rumble felt in your every breath here. The basalt columns hanging from the cave ceiling do not absorb these sound waves but deepen them further to reach you, and you find yourself at the very general point where everything began and ended in your own world. The undying heat contained within the sound causes the muscles on your shoulders to relax one by one, all words in your mind to evaporate in this smoky formation. It is such a rumble that it seems to tell you a story that has been ongoing for days in 1,000 different tones of a single note. The muffled roar rising from the deepest part of the cracks sometimes takes on a higher-pitched and metallic timbre, incorporating the sound of the rock's expansion. The endless, human burning, and here forgetting mechanical noise left by the severe steam boilers and steel casting factories of the late 19th century now confronts you as a much more organic and primitive power in this natural fire pit. When the air's temperature combines with this sound's intensity, you feel your physical existence melts within this atmosphere and you become part of this rumble. A breath you take rises from below or becomes rhythmic with a hot air current. This is as monotonous as the regular rocking of a cradle, but comes together as unshakably. When the images in your mind darken, only that deep, soul-enveloping rumble that shakes the air remains. The muffled blow of a lava reaching the bottom pushes your consciousness towards the darkest, most dreamless depth of sleep, like soft yet effective hammers striking the world's largest anvil. The absolute awe and helplessness of ancient people living at the foot of Mount Etna in the 8th century BC, seeing these sounds from underground as warnings from the gods, now revives in your numbness at the mouth of this chasm. The sound does not frighten you. Instead, it comes like the final notes of an eternal lullaby that saves you from all responsibilities, from the heavy trust you carry, and from all the journey's fatigue. Everything is so heavy, so hot, and so recorded that after a while this noise turns into an absolute silence, a smoky peace that extinguishes the last crumb of light in your mind. You fall like a heavy stone into the bottomless and safe well of sleep, accompanied by the lava's endless song. Good night.